smoking gun or smoking ruin. Last week, the so-called palace letters were finally released. Partisans on both sides of this issue claim vindication about their theories surrounding the dismissal of the Whitlam government in 1975. Trigger warning. I'm actually going to try to be nuanced in drawing conclusions about any long-term implications for the Australian Republic to be derived from the events of 1975. It is possible for decent, patriotic Australians to differ on this matter. And stay tuned immediately after tonight for Troy Bramston's insights into the 1975 dismissal affair. But let's be really clear up front. The conspiracy theories that suggest the Queen intervened in Australian domestic politics have been comprehensively debunked. This was always a domestic political crisis, and it was ultimately resolved by the Australian people. Were there breaches of convention? Yes, sadly there were. The replacement of 2 ALP senators by effective coalition votes in the upper house perverted the result that Gough Whitlam secured at a double dissolution on May 18, 1974. But the Australian people ensured that such a travesty could never occur again when they codified the method of filling such casual Senate vacancies by referendum in 1977. Neither should 2 justices of the High Court have provided private advice to Sir John Kerr. The court has steadfastly refused to offer advisory opinions. Therefore, no individual justice of the court should privately communicate about justiciable matters with anyone. Yet, becoming a republic would have no effect on either of those breaches of convention. I voted for the republic model in 1999. I regret I wouldn't be able to do so again. The simple fact is there's no such thing as a minimalist Republican model. It would involve root and branch overhaul of our system of government. It's not time for that.
And a reminder Nick, for our viewers.
Are you maintaining your age?
I am indeed, Catherine. And a reminder for our viewers that our half-hour news special, The Whitlam Letters Inside the Dismissal, will air following, in my view, at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. But before that, I feel like I need to respond forcefully to some of the points you made there, Catherine.
Go ahead.
I mean, first, I feel that you've fallen victim to the Buckingham Palace spin that was put out this week. I mean, Buckingham Palace issued a statement saying that the letters confirmed the Queen's support for Australia's independence and that the Queen played no role. But what we now know is that that's just not true, that she was, in fact, involved, along with her private secretary, in being notified about what was happening around the constitutional crisis in Australia, and moreover, that she was involved in providing advice to the Australian Governor-General, John Kerr, about that. So, you know, I think the big picture here is that
how do we know that?
Just hold on a moment.
How do we know that? Anne Toomey, one of the leading constitutional experts who sought these documents, totally repudiated that view.
Well, what we can see from the 271 items of correspondence is that there was clearly a lot of conferral going on between Buckingham Palace.
How was it clear, Nick?
And
how
Australia.
was it clear? Tell us how it was clear.
But can I just make a bigger point? And it's this. That
you should tell us how it's clear.
It shows that Australia's affairs are being overseen, advice is being provided by Buckingham Palace. And it's just yet another reminder that in this day and age, in 2020, it's time for Australia to cut the apron strings. We're our own country and we should have our own head of state. But I've got to say the most disappointing thing, Catherine, that you said was that you don't support a republic anymore. Now, that is manifestly our destiny, Catherine, and I'm really upset
our
you've walked away from that.
I'm left speechless. I'll throw to you, Gemma.
Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. Nicholas always gives me at least a couple of things to redress. Now, first of all, apart from saying it's clear, he hasn't told us anything other than what we already know. There are hundreds of articles in these documents. It's not clear. I would prefer to defer to the country's leading constitutional law experts, as do most sound-minded people. Secondly, the conferral I think Nick is referring to is simply a conversation between Sir John Kerr and the Queen's principal private secretary in a legal framework. It is entirely appropriate for Sir John Kerr to ask the question about where these powers sit and the appropriate use of those powers. If you read that part, which I have, he's not saying, can I please, can I have your permission? I'm not going to pull the trigger unless I have the Queen say so. He is asking, as a former Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice of the New South Wales Supreme Court, he's asking a conversation within a legal framework which anyone can understand. And as for a republic being manifestly our destiny, what an outrageously arrogant thing to say, Nick. What an outrageously arrogant thing to say. And that there is a big part of why the Australian Republican movement is a dead duck in the water right now, because it arrogantly thinks it represents most Australians. And I'll wager most of us, myself included as an employer, are solely focused on our families and our businesses and navigating this COVID environment. Don't insult us by telling us what our destiny is.
It's a 10th order issue for my money, but...
well, look,
Nick,
let me respond by...
The simple fact is, Nick, the reason I walked away from it is there is no minimalist model for a republic. The Crown was imported into our Constitution. And hear me out on this. You were an advisor to Kevin Rudd. When your government, the government of which you were a staff member, tried to get the immediate cash payments to Australians during the GFC, you know what they relied on? An interpretation of the royal prerogative imported into the executive power under Section 61 of the Constitution. That's what you relied on to do it. So you can't run with the hares and hunt with the hounds on this. The royal prerogative is alive and well in our system of government. And you're talking ancient history. After the passage of the Australia Acts, the idea of any direct British intervention in Australian politics is completely unconstitutional and unsustainable. So you can maintain the rage as I asked you to, but I think you're being grossly unfair both to the Queen and also to those who've read the documents in their entirety.
Look, can I suggest that perhaps people's views of the Royal Palace letters this week are shaped by actually what their view is about the Republic? You're obviously both a constitutional monarchist there.
I don't care, actually, Nick. Truly, I don't mind.
It's our destiny for our nation till my dying breath. You can have your right to think otherwise.